The first time I playtested at the UK Games Expo was 2 years ago, and it's safe to say I made some mistakes. The second time I went back, I tried to learn from them, and so here are my tips to help you avoid the same pitfalls I fell into. Before we start, here's a little bit of background on the UK Games Expo. It's the biggest board game convention in the UK, as you may be aware. It's in only 2 weeks now, and the folk at Playtest UK have a large section in the corner where you can playtest other people's games. Or if you sign up in advance, you can do your own playtesting there. It's run by volunteers and is part of a charity project, so they will be raising money for some great causes. If you're interested in learning more about that, look at the Playtest UK website. It's one of the most unique playtesting situations I've ever been in. It's not quite like playtesting anywhere else, and there are a few things that caught me out. So let's dive into those tips and see if they can help you for your playtesting. Tip number one, find the smallest viable part of your game. There are loads of willing volunteers to come and playtest your game at the UK Games Expo, but a lot of them also have other things they want to do. Your playtest slot will be 1.5 or 3 hours. Very few people are going to want to spend all of that time playtesting a single game, which may or may not be properly formed. Most people want to go and see the stalls. There's so many of them, you probably can't even see them all in a weekend. And people want to go and demo other games that are already being sold. In a lot of cases, they want to go and buy games, or they already have pre-arranged game schedules with their friends. What that means is, yes, they'll be willing to play your game, but no, they're probably not going to sit through your 3-hour epic if it's not fully formed yet. What I find really useful at the UK Games Expo is to try and find the smallest viable part of my game and just playtest that. For example, the game I've playtested at the last two expos, Station Decimus, is made up of 4 missions. When I playtest at the UK Games Expo though, I only ever play a single mission. This lets people give feedback quickly, move on to other parts of the expo, and I still learn a lot about my game. And just as much as people probably don't want to be spending 3 hours playing your semi-formed epic adventure, they also don't want to spend 3 hours reading rulebooks. When you're playtesting at the UK Games Expo, carefully consider whether or not you want to take a rulebook with you. They can be helpful sometimes, depending on where in your playtesting journey you are and how complex your rules are. If it's more than a page though, you probably want to give it a miss. That being said, I've always found it really useful to take cheat sheets or perhaps just a rules summary to help the players get through the games quickly. That's always worked well, and it's also given me some insights into how intuitive some of the rules are and whether or not they can be condensed into cheat sheets or summaries. So, not long after I'd got back from my first playtesting session at the Games Expo, I was going through the feedback sheets when my wife poked her head over my shoulder to have a look. She noted that the scores that were particularly lower than the others was for rules clarity. So she suggested I might want to try working on my rulebook. I pointed out, as per the previous tip, I hadn't taken one with me, I'd been explaining the rules to the players myself. To which she replied, "Oh, you were explaining the rules. Well, no wonder they didn't understand." While I was a bit hurt, she's played enough games with me and I've taught her enough games to know that she's probably right. I'm not the best at explaining rules. This is a skill you pick up, especially for your own game the more you playtest it. And by the end of the day, I did find that those scores for rules clarity were increasing as I'd worked out the logical things to explain in the correct order and also noted some of the questions people were frequently asking about the rules and explained them up front. So, with that in mind, practice your rules. Explain your game in a mirror, on a camera, whatever helps you to nail down the most concise but effective way of getting your rules across. People don't want to spend ages having rules explained to them if it's not making sense. Some people like to just start playing, so if you can really condense down your rules into just a couple of sentences, get it out in a minute or so, that can also be really helpful. So that's my third tip, is practice. If after all that practicing you notice you're starting to get a sore throat or lose your voice, imagine how it's going to be in the expo hall. The Birmingham NEC is enormous. It's a huge, echoey venue filled with hundreds of stalls and tens of thousands of people shouting at each other about games. You'll quickly find that while you're explaining your rules over the table to people, you're not just talking, you're shouting at them. And you have to be heard in these kind of venues. Over the course of 3 hours, however, that shouting can leave your throat incredibly dry. So while it may sound obvious, this tip is to stay hydrated. Take water with you, you will need it. You'll often find lots of vendors talk about how they always pack throat sweets or bottled water, things like that to keep them going. Over a 3-hour playtesting session, water should be fine, but just be aware you will need it. I rocked up to my first playtesting session with a giant box of chocolates. I thought, what better way to entice people to come and play my game than with sugar-based bribery? Turns out that was completely unnecessary. After the end of my slot, I'd given away maybe 1 or 2 of the chocolates. Most people didn't want them, and I'd still had a steady stream of playtesters. This was for a few reasons. As I mentioned before, people are generally willing to come and give you half an hour or so of their time to playtest a game. They're very happy to do so. You've got a convention centre filled with people who are really enthusiastic about board games. You won't need to bribe them to come and play a board game. It's also partly, though, due to the staff there who are incredible at going and wrangling people to come and play your game. So I think I ended up leaving almost an entire box of chocolates with the staff as a thank you, not required for getting playtesters. This might seem obvious, you're probably already doing it, but tip 6 is bring a friend. Not just for moral support, but over the course of the day, it can be really helpful to have a friend with you. I always take my friend Danny to these things. He's great company, but also really helpful in my playtesting sessions. Whenever a single person or 2 people come over and want to playtest my game, which does 2 to 6 players, if I'm trying to get more feedback on how it plays at higher player counts, we can add both Danny and myself in and bump it by 2. That can be really valuable information. Also, though, Danny's played the game a lot before, so having someone else there who can hop in the game, play it, do certain things, or try strategies out to see how it impacts the game with other players, or even do certain actions that aren't necessarily super obvious in the explanation to try and remind people that they're available. All this can be really helpful, and having them with me definitely helps me get more out of my playtests. With some of my newer games, I have, for example, one co-op game which is only for 2 players. Now, sometimes I'll get a pair of people to playtest it, or sometimes just one person playtesting it with myself. But it can be really valuable to not need to play myself, to stand back and just watch 2 other people making the choices and see if the things that I've designed in the game are doing what I hope they would. Whenever you're playtesting, you probably want some loaded questions. The usual questions, rate this part or that part of my game out of 10, can be helpful and give you an idea of whether your rules need more clarity or whether or not the mechanisms are obvious and intuitive. However, you normally want to try and add at least one question which really focuses on something specific. This is where I find that I get the most value from my playtests. If I ask people generic questions, I get generic answers. How did you find the game? Yeah, it was really fun. I enjoyed it. Thanks. It's nice to hear, but it's not super helpful. Instead, if I can focus on any mechanisms that have changed recently or ones which I'm not entirely sure are working the way I wanted them to, I can ask people about that specifically and I get specific answers. People are much more willing to give slightly negative feedback if it's on a specific topic. Like I say, if you ask them if they enjoyed your game, they'll probably say yes. If you ask them whether or not one specific mechanic worked well, they might not think so. So having some preloaded questions can be really helpful. In an upcoming video, I was planning on sharing some of the questions I tend to ask in more detail. But if this is your first time, don't worry. Playtest UK provide a really nice feedback form. It is mostly generic questions, but you can add some of your own in there, and it at least gives you some pointers to start from. 3 hours of shouting at people across a really busy expo, explaining rules, hearing feedback about your game, and trying to think about how you're going to implement that feedback when you get home is really tiring. It's really good fun and you'll learn a lot, but it can be quite exhausting. I tend to try and leave the space after my playtesting slot fairly empty, or playtest on the Sunday afternoon and then get in the car and go home. It can be a lot to take in, and after it, you might not feel like any really heavy games. So I'd recommend not booking in a game of Twilight Imperium directly after your playtesting slot. Instead, maybe just use it to stroll around parts of the venue that you haven't been to yet. Or perhaps if there's been any lighter games that have caught your eye that you want to go and play a demo of, try and get those in then. One more bonus point, be kind to the staff there. They're a lovely bunch. They all volunteer to be there because they want to help other people bring their games to life. Many of them are game designers themselves, and you might even spot them playtesting their own games at other parts of the weekend. If you do, go over, give their game a go, try and give them some feedback and help them in their own game design journey. Generally though, just be nice to them, have a chat to them. They're a really friendly bunch. And without them, the playtesting section wouldn't exist. So those were my tips for playtesting at board game conventions. Let me know if you think I've missed any, or if you have any great tips that you'd like to share. Pop them in the comments below. Also, if you want to see the game that I've playtested at the last 2 Games Expos, you can find a link to the free print and play in the description. I hope to see you there. I'll be there again this year, as I mentioned, Sunday afternoon, 1 till 4, and I'll be playtesting some of my new games. So if you're around, come and say hi.